Welcome to Introduction to Linguistics 2. I'm Dr. Eva Dausa, and this is the beginning. In this blog, we're going to focus on multilingual speakers, and the first thing that I would like to do is to explain to you why this is a good perspective to take in furthering any studies about linguistics. So let's start by taking a look at the map of the world. If we look at just any kind of map, we have been gotten used to identify a bunch of little units that we call countries. So if we were to ask how many countries are there, I don't know if you have ever encountered that particular question, but it's easy to pull out a list, and we will see that it contains between 190 and 196 countries. The first thing that is striking here is that there is not unanimity in counting the countries. So there's a 6-point difference between one list and another list. And this is because not all countries that have claimed statehood are recognized as such by everybody. So we have countries like Kosovo or Palestine or Taiwan or Catalonia that in some context they will be in the list, and in some other context they will not. So that's why there's a discrepancy. The same happens if we were to ask how many languages are there in the world. We have a list of between 5,000 and 7,000 languages. So here the disparity is about 2,000 languages, which is quite a bit. And this is not because linguists don't know how to count. This is because some languages are accepted as such internationally by all accounts, and some languages are not. Some languages are considered language by some scientists or countries, and dialects or just bad way of speaking or something like that in other contexts. So that's why we have a different count. We also see that most countries are multilingual. If there's only 200 of them and there's up to 7,000 languages, the reality is that most countries are multilingual. Now, languages are not equally distributed among the population. So much like wealth, for example, the richest 1% of people own more than the other 99% put together. So with languages, it's a little bit the same. So there are countries that are very multilingual and countries that are less so. The country with most languages, for example, is Papua New Guinea, with 849 languages in its territory, while, for example, North Korea is notably a monolingual country with only one language listed. Now, because citizens of a country are generally required to speak the language of that country, but they might also come into contact in the daily life with other languages, that means that most people in a country will be multilingual because there are several languages in a country. For example, you have here the Netherlands, in which there are 2 official languages, Dutch, which is official in the whole of the territory, and Frisian, which is co-official with Dutch in Friesland. But of course, if you look at the map, you see different colors because that's a linguistic map of the Netherlands, and then you will see that there are several more languages that are recognized in some of these accounts, at least. So most people in a given country will be multilingual. Again, that does not mean that languages are equally distributed among the population. So we have languages that have a lot of speakers and languages that have fewer speakers. You can see in this diagram that some of the languages you have the big ball is for Mandarin, and then you have Hindi, Spanish, Arabic, English, etc., that have pretty big bubble of speakers, while other languages are more discrete in number. You can see if you look closely that Dutch, for example, is not such a small bubble in this infographic, so you will be surprised. But in general, languages differ in the number of speakers that they have. In fact, there are some 250 languages alone that are spoken by 97% of the world's population. That is 250 languages from those 7,000 that we have said before. And even more, 50% of the world's population natively speaks only the 13 most widely spoken languages. And by the way, here you have them. And in this list, you will see that some of them will surprise you. Like, I don't know if you knew that Javanese or Wu would be among the 13 most spoken languages, but they are. Of course, we only have the ranking for the first 100 or so languages that are spoken by more than 7 million people. If you're wondering about Dutch, by the way, Dutch is number 57 with 28 million speakers. So that's not negligible in a list of 7,000. But if you look at Frisian, for example, with only 500,000 speakers, that is not in the ranking because it's fewer than 7 million people. But that means that most people will be multilingual, and if you don't need to go to exotic places to find that. So, for example, in one of the last surveys of the European Union, 56% of people declare themselves to be at least trilingual, meaning they're speaking 3 languages. These were mostly inhabitants of smaller countries, such as Luxembourg or Slovakia or Latvia or the Netherlands or Slovenia, while, for example, also other countries that are notably multilingual were not in the survey, though, such as Switzerland, because it's not part of the EU. But then other countries in this 56% were included that are mostly monolingual, like the UK, which would not be included anymore, that is mostly monolingual, with only 36% of the population or 38% of the population that speak one language, and that would be English. So in sum, most countries are multilingual, officially so, and most people within those countries are multilingual themselves as individuals. So multilingualism, being a multilingual, we could say, is the natural state of the linguistic lives of humans. Now, I would like to make a parenthesis here to talk a little bit about language ecology in the world. I said that not all of the languages have the same amount of speakers, and the vitality of those languages also vary. So we know, for example, that a language needs at least 100,000 people to survive long term. It needs 100,000 people who speak it to survive long term. Now, more than half the world's languages are believed to be spoken by fewer than 10,000 people. So they need 100,000 people to survive, and half of the languages only have 10,000 people. So it is predicted that half of the languages in the world, and that's about 3,000 languages by the medium count, they will disappear during the 21st century because they have fewer than 10,000 people, or at any rate, they don't reach those 100,000 people who speak them, right? Then from the remaining 3,000 that we have, another 2,400 will be in danger of extinction. That if we don't do anything to support them, they will also disappear. So that leaves about 600 languages that are in good shape as for survival, as for being able to be going into the 22nd century. That means that 90% of the world's languages are endangered. Many of them have not even been properly documented, and if we don't act promptly, they will disappear without a trace. This is actually quite similar to what is happening at the biological level, with many animal species being endangered, and some of them without any possibility of being restored in nature. So for language, it's the same, and what happens also with biological species, for example, in some species of insects and so forth, that we haven't even documented them, so we don't even know they exist. With languages, we know they exist, but we have not written a grammar of them, or we have not any recordings of them or anything like that, and they will disappear without any trace. So now we could ask the ecological question, which is what are the factors that produce this catastrophic situation in which most languages in the world are being endangered? When we talk about linguistics, when we talk about the vitality of a language disappears when parents decide not to transmit at least one of their languages to their children. Of course, parents are not going to go mute or not talk to their children at all, but when they don't transmit their language to their children, it will be the equivalent in biological terms to not having any babies of that species. Therefore, the species disappears as soon as the individuals that exist disappear too. So, of course, when you have in an ecosystem, and linguistic ecosystems are not different, when you have one piece that disappears, the whole ecosystem has to readjust. So the ecological question regarding language is also how do linguistic ecosystems adapt to this situation of extinction? And from a conservational or preservational point of view, we could ask what measures can we take to help preserving this important cultural linguistic inheritance. Of course, first we should ask, why should we do anything about it? What is lost when a language becomes extinct? This is equivalent to the ecological question of why should we do anything to preserve polar bears? I'm sure if you ask, seals, polar seals, they're very happy that the bears disappear. But still, we want to do something about it so that we don't lose that ecological richness and that balance. So with language, it's the same. What is lost when we lose a language, and why should do anything about it? Those will be the ecological questions, and these are not part of this course, so I'm going to close this parenthesis, but I just wanted to give you a taste of the kind of questions that are also an extension of this course. In the case of language, the easy answer to the question why should we do anything about preserving languages and the linguistic richness of the world comes from a very basic observation, which is that many people care about their multilingualism. Speakers typically, when you ask them, not all of course, but there's a huge proportion of people who do care about their language not disappearing. So if they care about it and they are by forces of the ecosystem, they are forced to lose the language, or they are compelled to have to abandon one of their languages, it makes sense to at least consider the possibility that we might want to support them to keep their multilingualism. And you have here a bunch of websites that I have pulled out, giving you an example of the kind of things that people say about, how can we go about preserving our multilingualism for ourselves and for our children. So I'm going to stop this video here so that you can actually click on the links that I gave you, and you have the PowerPoints in the course, in the Blackboard platform. And I will let you just look at them, and then I'll see you in the next video.